Hello, say Charat. Almost everyone says they would like to be rich. It would be nice to have some money in the bank so they could buy whatever they want, to travel the world, to have a peaceful retirement. But have you taken a moment to calculate exactly how much you'd have to consider yourself rich? The concept of wealth is very relative. The same amount of money can mean wealth for someone and, at the same time, not much for someone else. That is why, if you have a vague goal like I want to be richer, you will hardly achieve your goal. In the end, the more vague a goal is, the lesser your chances are of accomplishing that goal. So let's be more specific. Let's calculate exactly, cent by cent, how much money you would need to raise to accomplish your goal of being a richer person. You can consider yourself rich when all your bills are paid by your passive income, and that is financial independence. Imagine the following situation. You spend $10,000 per month to pay all your bills, groceries and housing and transportation and health and education, all that together, you spend $10,000 per month. Now, imagine that over the years, you've managed to also raise $2 million in investments, and those investments, on average, give you 0.5% every month. 0.5% of $2 million is exactly 10,000. So this means that every month, without having to do anything, the value you have invested passively generates an amount that is enough for you to pay all your monthly expenses. So that is the concept of financial independence that we're going to be using during this conversation. Financial independence is when you passively receive enough income to cover all your monthly expenses. And when that happens, you have a high amount of freedom and security. You aren't afraid of being fired or that you will lose your clients or that you won't be able to pay your bills. You're not trapped to a job that you don't like. You don't need to submit yourself to abusive situations. And also you can have a vacation or change your job whenever you want. And in order to have all of that, you need to focus on three main pillars: how much you spend, how much you can save, and how much your investments are able to produce. So the first step to be financially independent is having a clear idea about your expenses. The less you spend, the sooner you will be financially independent. If financial independence means being able to pay all your bills just with your investments income, you need to be sure of how much those bills are costing you. And that is why the first step to calculate your financial independence is knowing exactly how much you spend every single month. And to calculate your domestic budget, you can write down exactly how much you spend every month on things like housing, health, education, gadgets, transportation, energy, telephone, internet, gadgets, entertainment, clothing, and all other items. Next, you have to write down the expenses that you have to pay once a year: taxes, school tuition, some home and car insurances. And those annual expenses must be divided into 12 so you have an idea on average how much they cost you every single month. And adding up these two categories, now you have an estimate of how much you spend every single month. And now you can start calculating how much you'd need to have to be able to pay all these expenses only with passive income. The amount of money you need to have depends on your income. So to make the calculation simple, let's continue using imaginary numbers. Suppose that you spend $10,000 per month to pay all your bills. How much money would you need to save in order to have a passive income of $10,000 per month? Well, the answer depends on your net income after the taxes and inflation have been discounted. If you receive a modest return on your investment yielding, let's say 0.5% per month, then you would need $2 million. But if you have a yield of 1% a month, then you have to save only half of that value, which is $1 million. You see how your yield has an impact on how much you need to save to obtain your financial independence. The greater the profitability, the less accumulated value you will need. And that income can come from traditional investments like fixed income investments, real estate funds, and also stocks. But you can also have passive income in a different way. You can collect rent from real estate, royalties from some book or song or software that you've written or created. And you can also consider the Passive income being the money that you receive from some type of a job in which you invest your time only once and then you harvest the results for a long time. For example, a photographer that takes a photo and then sells that photo at a marketplace, an online image bank, and then passively receives a percentage of those sales. All the money that you receive without having to be actively working can be considered as passive income for your investments. The final amount of money to have financial independence can be scary, but compound interest is in your favor. When you make all those calculations, the amount of money you have to accumulate to conquer your financial independence can scare you. But you need to have in mind that in that case, there is something to your advantage: compound interest. I'll continue using the example of someone who spends $10,000 a month and gets a return on that investment of 0.5% each month. That person would need to make $2 million, right? That is a high amount. And you can imagine that such a person would never be able to save $2 million. If a person kept $1,000 every month just under their mattress, it would take them around 160 years to reach $2 million. When they would reach that goal, well, it wouldn't be enough because inflation would have changed their calculations. Inflation is very important because what you can buy today with 1,000 is not going to be the same thing that you're going to be able to buy for that amount of money in 10 years from now. Now, if that same person saves that same 1,000 per month, but instead of leaving it under their mattress, if they used to invest that money and get a net yield of 0.5% per month, the total time would shrink to 41 years. And after this 41 years, that person would have almost 4 million, which would be the equivalent of today's 2 million when you consider an inflation of 2% per year. If the same person manages to save 2,000 per month, that amount of time would be reduced to 30 years. If it would be 3,000, 25 years. 4,000, 21 years. Now, regardless of the numbers, you just need to understand the logic behind it. The more you get to save, the less your expenses are, and the higher your return on investment is, the faster you will achieve your financial independence. And even if you can't reach the final number, your passive income can pay part of your bills. Let's say you manage to reach half of your goal. I don't think it would be bad to have half of your bills paid passively, would it? So the sooner you start, the better. But regardless of your age, it is always better to have something, some money, than to constantly depend on your job's income to pay your bills. So start today with whatever amount you can afford and then increase your assets little by little. What seems unreachable today gets closer and closer with time, making your dream of becoming a richer person more certain. Do you think that the numbers that we're using here are completely out of your league? Or do you think that you will never be able to save that amount of money every month? Do you think I'm speaking to someone who is at a very different level from your current level? If you answered yes to any of those questions, I'd like to tell you that it is possible for you to increase your financial level as long as you're willing to change your mentality about money. That is why I'm inviting you to watch a special class from the Truly Wealthy course that talks about financial taboos. You can watch the class now by visiting arata.se/trulywealthy.